Hello, my name is Alexei Novitzky, and last Saturday I was in a podcast talking about spirituality with Artisan Tony, Chris Lehto, and Luis Elizondo. And Luis brought up the concept of beings becoming rusty. Let's take a look at this a little bit closer. But before we get started, just make sure to hit that like, share, subscribe, and notify.
It is a search for meaning. That's just what I think. And I think it's a search
Chris,
for
that's
meaning. Yeah.
really interesting what you just said, and I want to share something with you. And I don't want to cut you off, but this
No, go
is
ahead.
it's fascinating you say this because I had a really good conversation with a dear friend of mine, and I won't say who, but guys very much into philosophy, and by the way, very qualified. And he opined something, and he explained it to me in very lay terms, which is often what I appreciate because I'm not so smart. Um, he he explained it a bit like imagine you have this vat of copper, pure copper, at the U.S. Mint, and they're going to make a bunch of pennies for the month. And so they have this huge cauldron of boiling pure copper, and they make all these little pennies, and those pennies wind up going into circulation. And over time, those pennies, because of the natural state of the universe and how entropy works and whatnot, they start to rust, they start to oxidize, they start to take on the patina of the environment, right? And then at some point in time, when the pennies have outlived their usefulness, they go back to the U.S. Mint, at least in theory, they get melted down. The slag and the oxidation is scraped off the top, and those pennies go back to the hot cauldron of collectiveness, back to the one, to the big hot pool of copper, pure copper, only to potentially go back out again and to eventually make another penny and be recycled. I found that very interesting. Again, I don't necessarily subscribe to it one way or the other, but it reminded me of that conversation I had with my friend when you just said what you said.
Very interesting reference how he used the word rust. Let's go back to a podcast I did with Artisan Tony about 2 months ago.
Objects come from. And when you consider all of time and all of your manifestations through this fluid, you can see that it almost creates like a wave that's popping in and out of existence. And so if you have that golden flower structure throughout all your manifestations, you literally create something like this, which is what I call a golden chain. And this relates to the concept of interdimensional alignment. So this would be literally the Dalai Lama's perfect incarnations coming back every time after a series of experiences. Yeah, so basically you could say that would be like a perfect reincarnated being throughout all the lives. And then you could say this would be someone who basically never really reached their golden spot throughout their life, right? And so I think one good way to compare these two reincarnated beings is to think of them as almost like an electrical wire, right? And the one we're looking at right now is very, you could say, rusty. It doesn't have a really good connection because all these are different. They're all branching from different places. They kind of go out. There's a little bit of overlap, but they don't really know what they want or what they're doing. So it creates a lot of turbulence within that whole bigger structure of the fluid of time. And when you go to this other one, right, this makes a really, really good wire. And so...
Oh, yeah. So it carries energy.
Right. So it carries energy better, but also information. As far as like being able to remember experiences from past and future lives. And so you could say that by always manifesting from zero, not only do you have like a more solid and crystallized foundation, but literally you carry your energy through the different lives of existence and experience.
Yeah, when you said wire, I was looking at it improperly because the energy is being created in each little vortex, right?
Right.
Or from the 0 point or whatever.
Yeah, and so then when you just want to think about how just energy transfers, like think of it as a solid structure in that fifth dimensional flow. Like this one doesn't have as good of a connection. But what's interesting is that changing your now moment affects your future. Sorry, and it affects your future, but it also affects your past. So by creating a more stable now, you've literally made a more stable past and future for yourself.
I'd like to read you now a short section from the book, The Physics of Love, Synchronicity. Interdimensional alignment. Interdimensional alignment would be the concept of aligning the self to the greatest flows in reality. It would almost seem like a chain formed by perfect flowers that have stemmed from the golden spot over several lifetimes. Let's call this a golden chain. In a six-dimensional view, this can be considered a golden wire, similar to an electrical wire used to pass information or electricity in common household applications. In typical household wires, the more solid a wire is, the better it will perform. You can see in this golden chain that the delusions overlap in such a way that the energy or information may be easily transferred. This would be an example of someone who has never achieved their golden spot. The reincarnations do still overlap and information may be passed from one to another. However, it is clearly not as efficient at doing so. The quantum nature of reality shows us that all lives overlap within the loosh. This means as you effectively remove delusion from your current life, past and future lives will also be affected. Seed crystals. Seed crystals are commonly used in the fabrication of pure crystals. They are essentially a single grain that has a perfect three-dimensional structure which contains the desired structure for the material being grown. A very common application of this is in the fabrication of silicone wafers for computer chips. In short, in order to make a perfect silicone wafer for computer chips, you must first start by melting a volume of silicone. Then, while the silicone, the sand, is in a liquid state, you slowly dip your seed crystal in from above. The seed crystal is not liquid. It is a solid and has the shape of the desired formation. The seed crystal is then slowly raised from the molten silicone, and as it does, molten silicone sticks to it and rises with it. As the seed crystal continues to be lifted, the molten material begins to solidify. As the material solidifies, it takes a crystal formation. Typical crystals solidifying in the wild are exposed to many different physical vibrations, and so the crystal does not come out perfect. However, with the use of seed crystal and the method described, you may form perfect crystals of any size and any material. We will return to this. So then it goes into cleansing hitchhikers, hurricanes in the loosh, great cycles of orbiting universes. That's kind of important for this. So there are many orbits within the loosh that may offer habitats to conscious beings. When we look at the relationship of our experience to the nearest habitable zones, we see that time dilations exist. Zones towards the Noviverse would be experiencing more time, and zones towards the lower verse would be experiencing less time. Considering experiences are becoming denser, we see that the lower verse side could be considered beings from the past or of a more pure nature. The time dilation chart showed earlier depicted the alignments inward. We'll just skip forward. The alignment that we are currently undergoing is one that occurs roughly every 2029 years. The last great cycle could be related to the age of the Pisces or the coming of Jesus. Pure speculation, but the Star of David may be created by a temporary alignment of orbiting universes from the lower verse direction. We are now entering the age of Aquarius. So then he goes into cluster origins, talking about the grains of consciousness. So this is grains within crystals. Let's now go back and consider the concept of seed crystals in relationship to making desired crystals of any type. In order for a crystal to properly take shape of the seed, it must first be melted. For example, when relating to the silicone wafers, grains of silicone that are not fully melted will not be able to take the shape of the seed crystal as it rises from the batch of liquid sand. This would be considered an imperfection or unusable section of the wafer. Unusable material typically will be melted down again and used during the next process of forming the next crystal. So then it goes into molten distortions. Considering we are all composed of mind, body, and spirit, and understanding how postures of all three may solidify, we see that maintained experiences within fractals of delusion may cause our postures to solidify. Understanding this and knowing we are somewhat born into fractals of delusion, we see that the liquefying of selves is somewhat necessary in order to take a more pure vibration or crystal within the fluid of time. And then it goes into fluid perceptions right here. So when you consider a molten mind, body, and spirit diagram versus one that has taken postures, you see that much friction may exist. All beings rise in conscious density as our experience drifts inwards, and so a liquefaction is somewhat necessary in order for beings of higher density to continue to exist. So here it talks about the current state of society, and how you could say our mind, body, spirit diagrams have been becoming melted. And then it talks about diverging and converging timelines based off of the great cycles of orbiting universes, which then basically takes us to, you can see that the mind, body, and spirit diagrams are being recrystallized. And so here we have the age of Aquarius. You may now see how a single solid crystal of mind, body, and spirit may cause the rise in consciousness of a once entirely melted collective. Mankind has had the technology to travel to the moon and beyond for about a century. However, it is important that all three, mind, body, and spirit, rise together. This new spirit will be the one that combines both modern benefits of societal structures with our prehistoric method of mate selection. With our new ability of compassion and understanding for how we influence the denser experiences of creation, we may be better suited for exploring these once unforeseen realms. Our harmony determines our potentiality.